نحمده ونصلي على رسوله الكريم أما بعد بسم الله. Surah Al-Qamar. Surah Al-Qamar is a Makki surah, 55 ayat and 3 ruku. Qamar means the moon, and the name comes since the beginning of the surah mentions the splitting of the moon as a miracle of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. And what is the connection of this surah with the previous surah? So towards the end of Surah Najm, the approaching day of judgment is mentioned, Azifatul Azifa, and Surah Qamar begins with the same topic, Iqtarabatis Sa'a. Also, Surah Najm alludes to past nations who were punished due to the denial of their prophets, whereas Surah Al-Qamar details the punishment and the conditions leading up to their destruction. So synopsis of the surah is that the surah begins with a warning of approaching day of resurrection. It also describes one of the major miracles of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which is the splitting of the moon. We see that the state of people rising from the grave on the day of judgment is explained in the surah. And also there are details of punishment given to past nations, including people of Nuh alayhi salam, Lut alayhi salam, and the nations of Ad, Thamud, and Fir'aun. And finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala repeatedly reminds us in the surah how He has created ease in the Quran in terms of understanding and memorization. One of the virtues of this surah is that it was recited by Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in the prayers of Eid, of both Eid al-Adha and Eid al-Fitr. As comes in the nation of Abu Dawud, Sa'ala Aba Waqid al-Laythi, ma kana yaqra'u bihi Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam fil Adha wal-Fitr. فقال كان يقرأ فيهما ميقاف القرآن المجيد واقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. Nabi Dawud, Umar asked Abu Waqid Laythi, what did the Messenger of Allah ﷺ recite during the prayer on the day of sacrifice and on the breaking of the fast? He replied, Nabi ﷺ recited at both of them Surah Al-Qaf and Surah Al-Qamar. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر. The hour has come near and the moon has split in two. So we also see in Surah Anbiya, اقترب للناس حسابهم وهم في غفلة معرضون. The time of their reckoning is approached for the people while they turn away in heedlessness. And we see in a narration narrated by Anas and Muslim, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, بعثت أنا والساعة كهاتين قال وضم السبابة والوسطى. I and the last hour have been sent like this. And while saying this, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam joined his forefinger and the middle finger. So as we discussed in Surah Najm, the closeness of the Day of Judgment could be understood when taken in reference to the human history or the age of the earth. And in that respect, even though these verses were revealed more than 1400 years ago, the news of Day of Judgment being imminent still holds true. Another key topic of this verse is one of the major miracles of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, which is the splitting of the moon. The disbelievers of Makkah asked Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to produce a proof of his claim of prophethood. He was sitting in Mina at the time, and when they asked for a miracle, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala split the moon in two parts. And this splitting was so obvious that one half of the moon was on either side of the mountain. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said to everyone present at that time, be witnesses. And people clearly saw this miracle, that the two pieces then joined back. But instead of believing in him, they started saying that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam did a magic upon them. And then they started thinking, well, how to disprove Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? And they thought, well, let's ask people who are not around him at that time, because it's not possible for Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to put magic on anyone across the world. So let's wait for people coming from neighboring parts of the country, because they were not in the audience. They would not have been under the influence of magic. So we should ask them whether they saw a splitting of the moon. And indeed, when these travelers came, they confirmed seeing the splitting of the moon. However, still, people of Makkah rejected Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam and this miracle. And this incident is recorded in many narrations. A couple of them we'll talk about here, narrated by Anas bin Malik in Bukhari. He said, أن أهل مكة سألوا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم أن يريهم آية فأراهم القمر شقتين حتى رأوا حراء بينهما. the people of Mecca asked Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam to show them a miracle. So he showed them the moon split in two halves, between which they saw the Hira mountain. Another narration, narrated by Abdullah bin Mas'ud in Bukhari, he said, انشق القمر على عهد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فرقتين فرقة فوق الجبل وفرقة دونه فقال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم اشهدوا. During the lifetime of Allah's Messenger صلى الله عليه وسلم, the moon was split into two parts. One part remained over the mountain and the other part went beyond the mountain. On that, Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, witness this miracle. These narrations are so numerous that they have reached the status of mutawatir. Therefore, there is no reason to deny the miracle of splitting of the moon. وَإِن يَرَوْا آيَةً يُعْرِضُوا وَيَقُولُوا سِحْرٌ مُسْتَمِرٌ. And if they see a miracle, they turn away and say, passing magic. So the word mustamir means something that will go away soon or something that will come to an end. Quraysh said that this was an illusion and its effect will soon diminish and fade away. Another interpretation of the word mustamir is it means strong and firm. In this context, then the verse would mean that they said the magic is a very strong and potent magic. وَكَذَّبُوا وَاتَّبَعُوا أَهْوَاءَهُمْ وَكُلُّ أَمْرٍ مُسْتَقِرٍ. And they denied and followed their inclinations, but for every matter is a time of settlement. So the reason for the denial that people of Makkah showed at that time was their own desires. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala clarifies how everything has own time. And when that time comes, all the objections against it, all the misunderstandings about it will be clarified. Istaqrar means to settle. And every matter must reach its end, and any false claim should perish eventually. وَلَقَدْ جَاءَهُم مِّنَ الْأَنبَاءِ مَا فِيهِ مُزْدَجَرٌ. And there has already come to them of information that in which there is deterrence. So the word muzdajar means deterrence. And here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is referring to the news of previous nations and the miracles. So how previous nations were destroyed and that people of Makkah were aware of those past nations, and similarly the miracles that were shown to them and they witnessed them, and yet all this knowledge should have been a reason to deter them from rejecting Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, yet they followed their desires and rejected Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Hikmatun balighatun fama tughni an-nuzur. Extensive wisdom, but warning does not avail them. Here, extensive wisdom, hikmatun baligha, is referring to Quran. So Quran has brought stories of the past. Quran has given to them news of things they were not aware of, and yet they were not able to take heed, and instead they rejected it. As it comes in Surah Yunus, ayat number 101, وَمَا تُغْنِ الْآيَاتُ وَالنُّذُرُ عَنْ قَوْمٍ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. But of no avail will be signs or warners to a people who do not believe. So once the heart of the people have been sealed, no matter what they see or whoever comes to them to give them the truth, they do not accept it. فَتَوَلَّ عَنْهُمْ يَوْمَ يَدْعُ الدَّاعِ إِلَى شَيْءٍ نُكُرٍ. So leave them, O Muhammad, the day the caller calls to a terrible thing. خُشَّ عَنْ أَبْصَارُهُمْ يَخْرُجُونَ مِنَ الْأَجْدَاثِ كَأَنَّهُمْ جَرَادٌ مُنْتَشِرٌ. Their eyes humbled, they would emerge from the graves as if they were locusts spreading. So, خُشَّ عَنْ أَبْصَارُهُمْ ذَلِيلَةً خَاضِعَةً مِنْ شِدَّةِ الْهَوْلِ. So humiliated, submissive from intense fear. That would be the condition of people rising from graves. Al-Ajdas means qubur, graves. So when people will rise from the grave, they will be extremely fearful. And they will be running towards the area of reckoning in such a haste and such a large number that it would seem like, when there's locusts that attack an area and they come in a large quantity and they're just swarming through the fields, that would be the scene at the time when people will be rising from the grave. مهطعين إلى الداع يقول الكافرون هذا يوم عسير. Racing toward the caller, the disbelievers will say, this is a difficult day. So the word مهطعين means مسرعين ماد عناقهم, rushing or walking quickly, is stretching out their necks. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here confirms how that day would be very difficult for disbelievers, similar to how he says in Surah Muddathir, ayats 9 and 10, فَذَلِكَ يَوْمَئِذٍ يَوْمٌ عَسِيرٌ عَلَى الْكَافِرِينَ غَيْرُ يَسِيرٌ. That day will be a difficult day, not easy for the disbelievers. Let's do a quick summary of ayats 1 to 8. So we learned that Day of Judgment is approaching very fast. اقتربت الساعة. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned the splitting of moon as an undeniable miracle of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We also learned that the reason of rejection by Quraysh and Kuffar at that time was because of their desires for leadership, their desires for control. And that's the same thing we see today, where people follow their desires, and even though they see clear signs and reminders, they ignore them. And finally, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that every matter will be settled at a given time. So the promises for Day of Judgment, the promises of reward and punishment are not clear to certain people today. But when the time comes, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed the time, those events, those promises will be fulfilled, and everything that is unclear will be clear to people. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم